I ruined my bully's life after 10 years, and it was worth every penny. He used to sit 2 rows behind me in Mrs. Lawton's class, that lopsided grin already fixed to his face like a birthmark made of arrogance. His name was Colby Mercer. Blonde hair gelled like he cared too much, laugh louder than necessary, eyes like glass shards that sliced through you without needing to lift a finger. Back then I was just Mason Delroy, skinny, nervous, voice too uncertain to defend itself. My stutter made me an easy target. He didn't just notice it, he weaponized it. Colby had a talent for tearing people apart without leaving a bruise. The first time he mocked me, it was in front of the whole cafeteria. I'd tried to ask where the lunch trays were, the words jammed up in my throat, vowels crashing into each other like broken teeth. He echoed my stammer back to me, exaggerated every syllable, turned my attempt at a question into a comedy routine. The entire table laughed, including people I'd called friends the week before. After that, they started keeping their distance. No one wanted to be caught too close to the blast radius. He didn't stop at this speech. My clothes, plain jeans, hand-me-down sneakers, shirts that hung wrong on my frame, were fair game. I didn't care about fashion, couldn't afford to, but Colby made sure everyone did. He renamed me Clearance Rack. Every nickname stuck like gum under the desk, impossible to scrape off. One by one, teachers began avoiding eye contact. My questions in class were skipped. If Colby tripped me, it was an accident. If I spoke up, I was overreacting. By the time we graduated, I was a ghost in my own life. Nobody signed my yearbook. Nobody noticed I was gone. And when Colby stood on that stage flashing a smile as he got his diploma and another round of cheers, he didn't even look in my direction. I wasn't a person to him, just a flicker of entertainment he forgot the second someone better came along. But I didn't forget him. Not when I moved out of state. Not when I got my first job folding brochures in a printer's office. Not during the years of night classes, ramen dinners, loan payments. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see that cafeteria, hear his voice echoing my worst moments back at me with a smirk. That sound became the rhythm I worked to. I didn't chase revenge. I chased competence. I chased resources. I learned the systems most people ignored: corporate networks, back-end data structures, contract law, the unglamorous mechanics of power. In 10 years, I went from freelance tech work to founding one of the fastest-growing cybersecurity firms in the country. We weren't flashy, but we were good, unfailingly, ruthlessly efficient. Our client list included banks, defense contractors, and private investment groups with deep pockets and deeper secrets. I became the guy billionaires called at 3 a.m. when they needed silence or leverage. They paid me in equity. I invested in silence. By the time I found Colby again, I had a penthouse with glass walls and a chair molded to my spine. My team was loyal. My legal counsel was sharper than a guillotine. I didn't need to find Colby. But one day I did. Pure accident. An assistant showed me a small marketing firm we were acquiring. Middle-tier agency, mediocre campaigns. But the portfolio included a name I hadn't seen in a decade. Colby Mercer, account manager. I stared at the profile photo. Same eyes, a little more tired, hairline receding, smile still trying too hard. His bio mentioned a brief stint in LA, then a return to hometown roots. No mention of high school. No hint of who he used to be. He looked like a man pretending to have turned over a new leaf. He had a LinkedIn profile full of motivational quotes, a podcast no one listened to about brand authenticity, and a photo of him holding a coffee cup that said, "CEO of my life." It reeked of desperation, and I read every post with the calm interest of a surgeon preparing for a familiar incision. I didn't buy the company out of impulse. I made the deal slow, untraceable. Used a shell subsidiary under an investment firm we controlled through 3 layers of obfuscation. When the purchase finally went through, Colby probably thought it was just a change in management. He kept his job, got a surprise promotion, new office, better title, slight bump in pay. I let him settle in. I wanted him comfortable. I wanted him to think he'd finally arrived, and then I scheduled the meeting. It was a Friday, the kind of bright, cheery morning where the light makes everything look cleaner than it really is. Colby walked into the boardroom wearing a navy suit that didn't fit as well as he thought it did. He smiled when he saw me. I was seated at the head of the table, hands folded, face unreadable. He stopped walking. Recognition flickered too late. "Mason," he said. The name tasted unfamiliar in his mouth. I didn't respond right away. I just let him stand there, processing. Watching his expression collapse inward was more satisfying than I expected. He couldn't place me in this room, in this chair, in this context. I gestured to the seat across from me. "Have a seat, Colby." He sat, slowly, like a man invited to a dinner and realizing too late it was his own funeral. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I slid the file across the table. His performance review, meticulously detailed. Late submissions. Inflated numbers on campaign results. Discrepancies in client reports. A formal termination letter, ready for signature. He read it in silence. Finally, he looked up. "You're firing me?" I met his eyes. "For lack of professionalism, poor performance, ethical inconsistencies." He swallowed. "Come on, man, this is personal." I leaned back. "You're not that important." That was the moment. The exact second the color drained from his face. The line wasn't even clever, but it didn't need to be. It was surgical, honest. He thought he still had the power to affect me, to negotiate, to manipulate. But he didn't. He started talking fast, offered to do better, claimed he was going through a rough patch, tried to drag in his divorce, his kid, his mortgage. I listened without interrupting. Every excuse was a reminder. He hadn't changed. He'd just aged into the kind of man who wanted sympathy instead of fear. He called it cruel. I called it closure. I signed the letter, stood, and walked out. No guards, no drama, just precision. By Monday, his office was cleared, his name scrubbed from the company roster. The digital footprint of his time there archived, then erased. He wouldn't sue, he couldn't afford to. And even if he tried, every document was airtight. I didn't tell anyone about high school, didn't share my story on social media. I didn't need validation. Revenge, real revenge, isn't about public spectacles. It's about the private silence afterward. That quiet moment when you realize you've undone someone, not out of rage, but strategy. And the money? Every dollar I spent to get there? Worth it. Every last cent. 2 weeks passed. I didn't think about him after the termination, not immediately. There were meetings to run, new clients to onboard, another merger proposal sitting on my desk like a loaded pistol. The machine kept moving. My phone never stopped buzzing. My inbox was a battlefield of agendas and hidden knives. From the outside, nothing had changed. Then a news alert hit my phone. Former marketing manager sues for wrongful termination after sudden corporate shakeup. No names were mentioned, just vague descriptions. But I recognized the details. The timeline, the buzzwords. It was Colby. He hadn't gone quietly. He was trying to claw back some dignity. Or maybe he really believed he'd been wronged. I read the article in full while sitting in the back of a black car on the way to the airport. I didn't react. I just forwarded it to Nadine, my legal officer, and added one line: "Handle it." By the time my flight landed in Chicago, she'd already prepped a response packet, documented every infraction he'd racked up in the 6 months before the firing. They weren't dramatic, just consistent. Missed deadlines, false metrics, passive-aggressive emails. No one had noticed at the time, but after I pointed her in the right direction, she unearthed everything. She was thorough like that. Colby didn't stand a chance. The court wouldn't even call it retaliation. It would look clean, cold, professional. Still, it bothered me that he'd pushed back. I hadn't expected him to go to the press. He was the kind of man who always assumed he'd land on his feet. But there was something deeper behind it now. That desperation wasn't just financial. It was personal. I realized then that for him, that moment in the boardroom hadn't been just a bad day. It had broken something. I'd taken his image of himself, something he'd protected like a fragile shield, and crushed it without raising my voice. That mattered more than the job, more than the paycheck, and it meant this wasn't over. Not for him. That's when I made a decision, one I hadn't planned to make. I wasn't going to let it end in silence. I wasn't interested in noise either. This wasn't about viral videos or public humiliation. What I wanted now was permanence. I didn't want to just knock him down. I wanted to make sure he never got back up. So I called in a favor. There was a man I knew, Gavin Krell. He worked in information reputation management. The kind of guy who specialized in cleaning or ruining digital footprints. Politicians used him to bury scandals. CEOs hired him to erase affiliations. He owed me 3 favors. I used 1. I didn't ask him to fabricate anything. I didn't need to. I just asked for a full digital background analysis on Colby. Anything out there? Every forum post, every comment, every photo, every forum thread, message board, and blog from college days until now. Gavin didn't ask questions. He just said, "Give me 3 days." What he found changed everything. Colby had tried to reinvent himself, but he'd left crumbs. In old Facebook groups, outdated Reddit threads, poorly hidden username aliases, and buried in those archives were posts, comments, casual, careless things, racist jokes from college, misogynistic comments on dating forums, screenshots of messages to ex-girlfriends that looked a lot like harassment. It wasn't a crime, not exactly, but in the corporate world, it was enough to stain a reputation. I still didn't go public. Instead, I compiled it into a file. A quiet, discreet collection of the parts of him he thought he'd buried. I sent it anonymously to 5 places. 3 companies he'd recently applied to, 1 podcast platform he'd tried to pitch, and a talent recruiter I knew he was talking to. None of them would respond directly. They wouldn't need to. They'd just stop calling him, ghost him, let the silence do the job. It worked. Within a week, his name was flagged in 2 HR channels I monitored through back-end systems. He was labeled as culturally incompatible. That was the new polite term for liability. He wouldn't know why the interviews stopped, why the rejections piled up, why suddenly no one in his network responded to emails. It would feel like gravity had shifted against him, but I still wasn't done. I needed to know what he was doing, not through rumors. I needed eyes. So I paid a contact in the local gig economy to shadow him for 3 days. Not surveillance, just observation. Where he went, who he talked to, what time he left his apartment. The man I hired, Luca, was discreet, wore a delivery jacket, carried a tablet, made notes that looked like food orders. He reported back on day 4. Colby had stopped going out before noon. He wasn't dressing for interviews anymore. He'd started attending these strange evening meetups in rented rooms above coffee shops, branding groups, startup pitch circles, anything that offered a mic and free coffee. He wasn't trying to rebuild his life. He was trying to rebuild his identity. He'd started pitching something new, a vague consulting firm, name not finalized, ideas unfinished. It wasn't a business. It was a performance. He was trying to be seen again, trying to feel significant. That was when I realized how deep his insecurity ran. He didn't just want success. He needed audience, validation, and that meant I could end this properly, not with noise, but with silence that looked like applause. I had one more card to play. I arranged for his startup to receive a fake interest email from a fabricated angel investor. The message praised his pitch, asked for a meeting, dangled just enough capital to get his heart racing. I built an entire digital identity around this investor. Fake articles, old podcasts, LinkedIn accounts with followers, even reviews from tech circles. The persona looked real enough to fool an analyst. The email invited him to a restaurant. Upscale, downtown, the kind of place you book 2 weeks in advance. I made sure the reservation was under the investor's name. I made sure Colby saw it confirmed. I made sure he showed up. He arrived 20 minutes early, checked his reflection in the window, practiced his smile in the glass. No one came. He waited over an hour. Eventually the hostess approached, informed him politely that the reservation had been canceled. No explanation. Just a miscommunication maybe. Or maybe not. He walked out trying to look like he hadn't just been gutted. Luca caught the expression on his face as he stood on the curb, checking his phone again and again, as if maybe the meeting was real and he'd just missed a message. That was the photo I kept. I didn't share it. I didn't need to. It was for me. Proof. Not of cruelty. Of control. He didn't try to sue again. Didn't post about it. He started shrinking instead. Deleted social media. Stopped showing up to networking events. Unsubscribed from everything. Became harder to trace. That was fine. I didn't need to see the fall anymore. I'd already watched the pieces collapse. Back in my office, I moved on. Closed 2 deals. Launched a new client initiative. Hired 5 people in a single week. The machine kept turning. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the calls stopped, I thought about him. Not out of guilt, just curiosity. I wondered if he replayed it. That moment in the boardroom, the cancellation at the restaurant, the job offers that never came. I wondered if he tried to rewrite the story in his head, tell himself it was bad luck, tell himself it wasn't his fault. People like him need that lie. It's the only thing that keeps their world from collapsing. But I knew better. It hadn't been luck. It had been deliberate, precise, engineered. And every cent I spent making sure he'd never get back up, still worth it. It took nearly a year before I heard his name again. By then, the company had doubled its market value. We'd acquired 2 regional firms, partnered with a government contractor, and shifted half our operations into AI-driven security. Everything was moving forward, efficient, predictable, clean. But Colby Mercer wasn't done yet. One of our junior analysts flagged a pattern. Multiple attempts from the same encrypted address trying to access our internal press contacts. At first, it looked like a bot sweep. Harmless. Then the access attempts became targeted. Only certain folders, only documents tied to HR decisions and public relations, all pointing back to the merger he was fired after. I had it traced. The IP led to a public library terminal, but cross-referencing the login times with camera footage showed him older, heavier, unshaven, eyes glassy. His hands shook when he typed. The staff didn't recognize him as a regular. He wasn't local anymore. He'd come back from wherever he'd been, quiet, invisible, forgotten. And now he was trying to claw into something again. He wasn't filing lawsuits. He wasn't speaking out. He was digging. I flew down personally. Quiet. No entourage. No public scheduling. Just a single trip. One day. One meeting. I walked into the library he'd been using. The desk attendant recognized him but didn't know his name. Said he came in late afternoons. Never spoke much. Just stared at the screen like he was waiting for something to change. She pointed toward the back room. He was there. Same jacket from the year before. Laptop open, hands frozen mid-type. He hadn't noticed me walk in. I stood in silence, watching the man who once made a career off of noise now reduced to a ghost pressing keys no one would read. He looked up. His face fell faster this time. No confusion, no forced smile, just resignation. He didn't bother standing, didn't even close the laptop. "You here to finish it?" he said. I sat across from him. Nothing between us now but a scratched plastic table and everything he'd ever done. "You tried to hack us," I said. He nodded barely. Didn't care if it worked. "Then why do it?" He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the cursor blinking on the screen. Then he said, "Because I needed someone to hear me." I waited. I was never going to beat you. I knew that. Not after everything. But I couldn't just sit there. You erased me. Not just from the job, from everything. No one answers my calls. No one remembers I existed. I thought maybe if I found something, anything, I could make you answer. I looked at the man sitting across from me. The man who once controlled rooms with just a laugh. Now hunched, defeated, digging for scraps of identity in forgotten files. "Do you remember what you said to me in high school?" I asked. He blinked, confused. "No." "Of course you don't." I stood, pulled a folded paper from my coat. It was a printed screenshot, a post he'd written in college, a joke at someone else's expense, one of the worst ones Gavin had found. I placed it in front of him. He stared at it. "You're not the only life you ruined," I said. "You just never noticed because you were too busy laughing." He didn't touch the paper. I leaned in. "This ends today." He flinched. "I'm not going to destroy you any further. I already did. What's left of you isn't worth the effort. But you try again. Once, you breathe in my direction, and I'll bury you so deep that your name will trigger spam filters. You'll be unhireable, unsearchable, invisible, permanently." I paused. "You got to watch what it feels like. What you did to others, this time it's stuck." He didn't respond. So I walked away. No police, no lawyers, no report. I didn't need them. The warning was enough. He knew I meant it. On the flight home, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt finished. There was nothing left to take. No more games to play. I'd seen the fall, seen the desperation, and it wasn't satisfying. It was confirmation. Colby Mercer was done. Back at headquarters, I deleted the last file with his name on it, removed the photos, archived the notes. I didn't keep a copy. I didn't need a trophy. This wasn't about reminders. It was about resolution. Years ago, he stood on a stage, proud, while I sat in silence with my name unspoken. Now he couldn't get alone without being flagged. I'd rebuilt every piece of myself. Without him, I'd outgrown his insults, outpaced his reach. The revenge wasn't the point anymore. The silence that followed, that was everything. So I let it go. I didn't think about him again. Not when I woke up. Not when I looked in the mirror. Not when I walked into the boardroom. He had no place in my world now. No voice, no echo. His chapter was closed.